Well, good morning. Welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. Apologies being a few minutes late on this first morning of British summertime. Just timing got away from me a little this morning. Right, what have we got for you today? Well, another packed show, of course. Plenty of interesting news to look at. One that will probably worry a lot of riders is the fact that a public, what is a PSPO? I can't remember what that stands for now, and I've just written the story. Anyway, it's to tackle noise and antisocial behaviour, and it applies to the Box Hill area. And I know that's going to upset a lot of motorcyclists. The access to a green lane, which had been previously withdrawn, has been rejected for motorcyclists in Devon. We'll have a look at that story because I don't think the justifications actually quite meet the decision. Anyway, Principal Insurance, we talked about them 2 weeks ago as having got an injection of cash where they've used it to acquire MotorCycle Direct and Ridesure brands. And then we have some UK and world news in brief, quite a lot of that actually this week. We'll have a quick look at the Flying Flea S6 from Royal Enfield. It's their electric motorcycle, and that has appeared in Europe, rather oddly at the Rome Marathon. There are some new battery technologies out there, and today I'm going to be looking at one that uses a silicone anode. Not here yet, but it's already won an award, and that's Honda's WN7. We'll have a quick look at an electric Simson conversion. That's the old MZ moped that you may remember. It lets it top the 45 kph speed limit, actually. Triumph have confirmed a new lineup of 350cc motorcycles, and we'll explain why that will be. They're coming to India, the Indian market. And then finally, we'll have a look at a problem with the way that we can define hazards, and particularly the way it applies to the hazard perception test, potential hazards. I'll explain the concepts of potential hazards, developing hazards, and actual hazards. So stay with me till the end of the show for that. So let's start with the first item as usual. Scroll through to the right bit of my notes, and I'll start with that first story actually. Now, if I can get the picture up on screen, there we go. This graphic appeared. Get the graphic up, there it is. Give you a zoom in view as well. Most learners would click for the cyclist. Now, it's not a particularly clear photo, very gloomy, probably deliberately. But it's the article on LinkedIn said, that's one of the reasons many people score low in the hazard perception test. The cyclist is moving, but it isn't a developing hazard yet, so it wouldn't score. In a hazard perception test, you don't click for something just because it's there or moving. You click when something develops and could affect your driving. Well, I've mentioned, as last week, that LinkedIn seems to have become a refuge for people with some surprising views on road safety. And I certainly think that applies here. So let's just try and zoom in a little bit so you can see what the situation is there. Right, there's the cyclist and there's an oncoming car. Now, I simply don't get the analysis that this is not yet a developing hazard. I would say that given the speed differential between a car, or a motorcycle for that matter, and the bicycle, the chances are that the average driver or motorcycle rider would already have decelerated at this point to avoid running the cyclist down. If you're braking when you're this close to a cyclist, then you're going to be braking quite hard. Now, if that is too early to respond to the hazard, there's something seriously wrong with the hazard perception test, and anybody who talks about this in a way that suggests it's right. And I will come back to this at the end of the show in the in-depth section, so stay tuned. Right, some more weirdness this time from Ride Apart, the website. So again, there's a zoom in picture and you can read the heading there. Now, quite a while ago now, I reported on Yamaha's three-wheeler, the Tri-City, or Tricity, I've no idea how you're supposed to pronounce that, and how it was having an airbag developed by Autoliv, ready for a future launch. Well, that time is now, and the launch is later this year. So it's just been reported under this headline that the already weird Yamaha three-wheeled motorcycle just got weirder by adding an airbag. Now, I don't really know why you would be thinking that a three-wheeler is weird, unless you think that the only format for a vehicle involves even numbers of wheels. Nor do I understand why the writer would think that the airbag is weird. They're just not very common. Now, as I explained when I covered the trial, the airbag module is integrated into the front panel of the scooter. So in a frontal collision, the system deploys upwards towards the rider to help absorb the kinetic energy and to reduce the impact with the sort of handlebars or whatever impact the rider has just hit. Now, the writer isn't convinced, saying, quote, "All this raises a few questions, and the biggest one is clearly this: do airbags on motorcycles actually work the same way as they do in cars?" The short answer is not really, unquote. Well, of course they don't work the same way in cars. He does go on to say that car passengers are constrained within the safety cage and by seat belts. And motorcyclists can, quote, "separate from the bike, tumble, slide, or get thrown over the handlebars depending on the crash." Well, now, pretty obviously, it's the frontal crash that the airbag is designed to help with, for the very simple reason that it's the most common crash involving rider injury. Now, of course, the airbag can't do anything if you're hit from the side, or and nothing if the bike is hit from behind either. But if you run into an emerging or a turning vehicle, then I'd say it's a damn sight better to hit the airbag than flying through the air and hitting the vehicle itself. And it means if you're not having to rely entirely on your riding kit to protect you, something that it really has a very limited ability to do. So I'm not sure why the writer finds this weird. Indeed, much of the article sounds like personal opinion rather than anything grounded in fact. And something that is, would have been extensively tested before Yamaha let it loose on the road. Now, an airbag doesn't mean you can ride around shedding helmets and riding t-shirts, shorts, and flip-flops. But I very much doubt Yamaha would have put their name to anything like this if the airbag didn't do anything useful. Right, okay, on to some weather news for the UK. Now, as I said, it is the first day of British summertime, but doesn't mean it's the end of spring. And it was a fairly chilly snap midweek. We saw a little sleety rain here in London, actually. But the next week sees some mixed weather, typical for the time of year, spells of unsettled conditions, but some dry spells and some sunshine too. Now, today, the bands of cloud and rain, which are across the north of the UK early on, will cross the UK from the northwest, and they will bring some sleet and snow to the highest ground, but they will break up as the rain band reaches the southeast in the later afternoon. Now, behind it, there will be some blustery showers to follow, mainly affecting the north, and temperatures remain in the very low teens. Monday sees some high pressure building from the southwest, and that should confine the wintry showers to Scotland and the north of England, and they should ease up later too. Further south, it should be mostly dry, sunny spells in the morning before cloud builds later on. It will remain breezy with temperatures again in the low teens. Now, Tuesday looks set to be a cloudier but milder day too. Any rain confined to the far west of Scotland, just a few showers elsewhere. Temperatures a little higher and pushing up into the mid-teens now. On Wednesday, a band of rain will push into northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. Will move east and it will fall the snow over the highlands, but elsewhere it should remain dry with variable cloud and temperatures still near the mid-teens. Now, by Thursday, the pattern looks to become more unsettled. There is a big chance of some more serious heavy rain pushing through the southwest Wales and into northern England. For Easter weekend, the picture looks mixed, and the best of the warmest weather and the sunshine is likely to be in the southeast on Monday. Right, okay, and so on with some news. Now, following last year's petition from residents in Mickleham and West Humble about noise and antisocial behaviour by drivers and riders, a Public Spaces Protection Order, a PSPO, I couldn't remember what PSPO stood for a moment, has been introduced around the National Trust site Box Hill. The area includes Zigzag Road and the roundabout near Denby's Wine Estates. Now, this is all down to the Mole Valley District Council, and their executive committee took this decision after the consultation with residents. Around sorry, something over 600 people took part, 62% backed the order, 29% opposed it, and 9% were undecided. Councillor Caroline Joseph said the move was to tackle behaviour that caused a public nuisance and was not aimed at spoiling biking traditions, which date back to at least the 1920s. And she said the move would, quote, benefit visitors to the local area and those residents and businesses, excuse me, whose quality of life has been affected by vehicle noise, whilst not affecting responsible and considerate drivers and riders. She added, it is important to recognise that the vast majority of motorcyclists in the area are considerate people who behave respectfully. Now, the order will remain in place for 3 years unless reviewed. I know some riders have already taken exception to the order, but frankly, it's been coming after the sort of COVID lockdowns in 2020 created a sort of spring and summer of peace and quiet. People have really sat up and taken notice of loud exhaust, mostly motorcycles, but also some cars. The behaviours that will now become an offence include revving engines, keeping engines idling, speeding stunts, driving in a convoy, exhaust popping or backfiring, racing, and sudden or rapid acceleration. Excuse me. I forgot to take my antihistamine this morning. So a number of countries have gone even further, of course, than this and banned motorcycles altogether. I do apologise. Right. Safety concerns have prompted the County Council to reject a call by motorcycle trail riders to restore access to a former green lane in East Devon. Now, the 2024 decision prevented vehicular access to Ryden Lane. It stretches for 2.5 kilometres. Well, we're using kilometres, we're in England. Between Mill Lane in Exton and Globe Hill in Woodbury, and it restricted access to walkers, cyclists and horse riders, basically turned it into a bridleway. The Trail Riders Federation, they believe the traffic regulation order, the legal process to prevent motor vehicles from accessing the lane, has been made without sufficient evidence that shared use would be dangerous. So the group have actually lodged a judicial appeal, but they agreed to pause these proceedings whilst the East Devon Highways and Traffic Orders Committee, HATOC, explored potential options. Now, it appears that the committee were offered an option which would allow motorcycle access again, but with a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. But councillors on that committee rejected it, arguing that A, it would be impossible to enforce, and B, active users would be discouraged from using the lane if motorcycle access was reinstated. Councillor Chris Burhop, for example, he said, quote, introducing motorcycles would go against the stated active travel strategies of Devon County Council, saying that all the comments he had seen from members of the public suggested that if motorcycles were allowed, it would restrict them using it for walking, cycling and riding. Nick Hookway, another councillor, said he could not support the recommendations. Well, that kind of ignores two things. First of all, it's not introducing motorcycles, it's reintroducing something they were previously allowed to do. And I very much doubt that all the comments that he'd seen from members of the public were negative. It seems to conveniently sidestep these arguments. And presumably the lane had been safely shared in the past. So I suspect the trial raiders fellowship may well decide now to pursue this matter in court. If I find out more, I will report back. Right, what else have we got for you? Well, 2 weeks back, I reported that the Manchester-based broker Principal Insurance was aiming to expand their motorcycle insurance coverage in the UK after they partnered with an underwriter, Wakeham UK, to provide additional underwriting capacity. Now, they promised that they would expand their coverage of the sort of niche areas. But the latest news is they've actually moved to acquire a broker, Europa Group, best known for the MotorCycle Direct brand, and this deal, which is financed with shareholder funds, will also see Principal acquire Europa Underwriting, presumably a different outfit. And they trade under the Ridesure wholesale brand. Now, this means Principal will now serve more than 120,000 policyholders. There's about 1.4 million motorcyclists in the UK, so it gives you some idea that they're approaching 10% of the market. And they say it will generate around £60 million in annual gross written premium. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't quite the news I was hoping for when they said they would be able to reach deeper into the niches of that highly specialist sector of motorcycle insurance, because this doesn't create new options, it simply consolidates existing policies under one roof. And what that usually does is force higher prices on premium holders rather than increased competition driving them down. And the statement from Principal Insurance's Managing Director Dave Bocock tends to confirm that when he says this acquisition not only makes impeccable commercial sense to Principal, but provides Europa with the opportunity to unlock shareholder value. Now, a cynic might say that the legal necessity to have motorcycle insurance cover in the UK is now being milked as a cash cow for and on behalf of shareholders. Right, quick break while I get my breath back. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to this show if you've not already done so? Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses. They can watch on catch-up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all the links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it, when the show's over of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay, so back with some UK and world news in brief. Got quite a chunk here, actually. The first story is an interesting one. Former Top Gear presenter James May, he's reached an out-of-court settlement after being charged over his 50-year-old GT750 Suzuki. Now, the charge was keeping a motorcycle which did not meet the insurance requirements, and I checked. This means that the bike was neither SORNed, the statutory off-road notification that you have to make if you're keeping a bike which is not being used for riding, or not insured. Now, it has to be one or the other, and there's typically £100 fixed penalty for this offence, but if the fine isn't paid, that can lead to court proceedings, even vehicle seizure, and I suspect that's what had happened in this case here. Now, there's dumb and there's dumber. And police seized a motorcycle and reported its rider for multiple offences, including riding without an insurance, after the rider caught their attention by riding the wrong side of a traffic island and by failing to display a rear L plate. That was always an old favourite for stopping motorcyclists. The bike itself was found parked nearby on pavement outside a local takeaway, where the rider told officers he was working as a delivery driver and relying on top-up delivery insurance. Now, this cover is valid, but only when a rider already has a standard underlying insurance policy. Unfortunately for this particular individual, checks revealed his main insurance had been cancelled around a week earlier. Now, over in the US, actor Alan Ritchson, he's the star of the Reacher TV series, if you know it. He came to blows with his neighbour Ronnie Taylor outside their homes in Brentwood, Tennessee on Sunday. The altercation apparently started when Taylor approached Ritchson to complain that he was disturbing the peace by riding his motorbike around the street. Now, police investigated the incident, and after reviewing evidence, including video footage and getting witness statements, they determined Mr. Ritchson's actions were found to be in self-defense. In fact, the only charges considered were against Taylor after the body cam footage that Ritchson was recording apparently caught him stepping out in front of Ritchson's bike and leaving him open to a reckless endangerment charge. Ritchson declined to pursue them. Now, in a week when arson attacks on ambulances hit news, 2 motorcycles and a van were torched in weekend attacks in Doncaster. The first bike was set alight around 7:15 p.m. on Saturday, followed by another fire involving a van just before midnight, and the second bike was attacked at around 7:10 on the Sunday evening. Now, 3 people were badly injured when 2 motorcycles were involved in a crash with a tractor in Aberdeenshire on Saturday. That's something I regularly warn people about. Overtaking a tractor often seems so easy, but they turn off so regularly. Anyway, the rider and the passenger of one bike, a 61-year-old man, a 52-year-old woman, and the 44-year-old male rider of the other bike were taken to hospital with what are described as serious injuries. The tractor driver, unsurprisingly, was not injured, and Police Scotland are appealing for witnesses and camera footage. In Sydney, Australia, 2 teenage boys sadly died when the e-bike they were riding collided with a bus. The 15-year-old rider and his 14-year-old passenger died at the scene on Monday. The driver of the bus was taken to hospital for mandatory testing. I was rather surprised to discover the current rules in New South Wales actually allow a child of any age to ride an e-bike and carry passengers, although a new law will introduce a minimum age limit for e-bike riders. Now, incidents like this, plus the high-profile February mass ride out over Sydney Bridge, which involved dozens of young e-bike riders, many on illegal e-bikes, some as young as 14 and in school uniform, has triggered a major crackdown. In a 2-day operation in the south of Sydney, police stopped 215 e-bike and e-scooter users and issued 170 fines and 99 cautions, and a number of the bikes were confiscated. One major Sydney hospital has said admissions for e-bike injuries has skyrocketed 350%, and police warned of further blitzes to come. Now, in response to fuel supply disruptions resulting from the Strait of Hormuz blockade, the Pakistan government is considering providing a petrol subsidy to motorcycles and 3-wheeled vehicles, and an official announcement on that is expected soon. Stocks are said to be good to last into May, but under the proposal, targeted users may receive 20 or 30 litres of subsidised fuel per month, and a QR code system will be used to distribute this to those who are eligible. Now, in Dhaka in Bangladesh, fuel, however, has run dry at most pumps during the course of the week, and so long queues formed where they did have some fuel. Government has imposed limits on petrol and diesel sales to try to stabilize the supply. Now, initially, the cap on sales to motorcyclists was set at just 2 litres, barely get you out of the petrol station, but it's now been raised to 5 litres, which is just over a imperial gallon, and the measures have caused panic buying in the country. Having run out of fuel, this pair took an enterprising way of refueling. They were pictured carrying their empty tanks to a filling station with some petrol. Now, a new facial recognition system is to be installed at a border checkpoint. I've lost the picture for that. And it will allow motorcyclists with open face helmets just to look into a camera to clear immigration, and they will be able to access the border crossing into Singapore in just 20 seconds. And this facial recognition system will progressively replace fingerprints as the principal biometric identifier for riders and passengers. Now, currently it takes about 30 seconds for motorcyclists to clear immigration into Singapore. But unfortunately, the fingerprint system currently being used has proven less reliable on rainy days because the water makes the fingerprints hard to recognize. Right, another quick break. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my Ko-fi pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Schools ebook shop with instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to ebook versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, and just want to make a quick mention of this week's supporters: Brian M, Mike, Brian L, Cliff, Graham, John Wombat and Mike. Several of those downloaded my latest Crash Scene Overtake ebook. Kay Simmons, Nick, and my good friend Anonymous, of course. Thank you all very much indeed for contributing, helping me keep these shows coming. Right, okay, so what's next? Well, some biking news. So let's just get the picture forwarded. There it is. The first story is that some new silicone anode battery technology could be on the way. Now, right now, the batteries that are used in EVs, including bikes like the Flying Flea we're about to see, they use graphite anodes, but the Porsche-backed Group 14 Technologies and the New York-based Psionic Energy say they have solved the biggest problem with silicone anodes, and this is stability. Now, silicone has some big advantages. It's one of the most abundant elements on Earth, for example. It's found in sand and quartz, so you can find it virtually anywhere. It's easy to process too, and it wouldn't suffer some of the drawbacks of graphite, which has relatively few sources. Now, the downside has been that when silicone is used as an anode in a battery, it has previously downgraded very rapidly, and that means the batteries themselves have had a very short life. But they say, Group 14 and Psionic, that problem has largely been solved. They say their silicon carbon anodes have delivered stable performance in full-size battery cells at high temperatures up to 60 degrees Celsius and across more than 1,200 charge cycles. They also say that the new silicone anodes are simply drop-in. So in other words, you can integrate them straight into an existing lithium-ion manufacturing line and it won't need retooling to use the new anodes. So if true, that's a pretty big deal. Now, they also claim there's increased energy density for the batteries, the other big drawback of the current lithium-ion batteries. Most EV batteries currently in production hold something between 200 and 300 watt-hours per kilogram, but the new silicone anode lifts this to around 400 watt-hours per kilogram. So up by a third to around twice the capacity. Now, what that means, of course, is, excuse me, really having trouble with my voice this morning. Now, what that means, of course, is that you can either get longer range from the same battery mass, or you can shrink the battery, which would be good for smaller cars and short-range motorcycles. And last of all, they say this is not lab bench science, but they have the production-ready cells just ready to roll. We'll see. Now, co-branding is increasingly common. It means one company turning up and sort of supporting a sort of an unrelated company. And Harris Tweed is the latest to deal with the motorcycle manufacturer. They are partnering with Triumph Motorcycles, a one-off speed twin 1200cc cafe racer A bike with a production run limited to just 800 units globally is being offered as the top prize for the 2026 edition of the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. Now, along with other exclusive design upgrades, you'll find a bespoke seat covered with Harris tweed, and I'm sure that will make all the difference to the bike's ride. Now, Honda's WN7, you may have noticed that it's been handed over to journalists to ride. There have been a number of tests of the bike appearing recently, but you still can't walk into a Honda dealership and ride one home today. Nevertheless, the machine has already won a design award because in this weird world, I'm using that word from earlier, bikes aren't judged on customer appeal and sales numbers. They're not judged on their practical performance or their long-term reliability. They're judged on how they look standing still under a spotlight. Now, another machine that has currently to prove itself is the Flying Flea from Royal Enfield, and I do have a picture of it here somewhere. Let me see if I can bring the thing up. Here it is. There we go. This is the Flying Flea C6. It's Royal Enfield's debut electric machine. It's obviously a retro-looking bike there with the girder forks, and it made its first appearance in Europe on Sunday last week when, for reasons unexplained, 23 of the bikes were ridden in a parade ahead of the Rome Marathon, together with a number of modern and classic REs powered by the more conventional internal combustion engine, ridden presumably along the marathon route. My guess is this is probably a mix of journalists invited to have a crack at the bike and possibly some influencers to have a go on it too. Where's the picture? Where's my picture gone? Sorry about that. I shared the picture. It's disappeared. Here we go. There we go. You can have a look at the bike. Just to zoom in on it briefly. So yes, there you can see there's the bikes lined up in Rome, ready to go riding on what looks like some wet cobblestones. Not my favourite kind of riding experience. Right. Okay. I've got my picture back. Let's have a look at another bike. Now you may recognise this. This is an MZ Simson, a moped from the 80s. Now, I mentioned the German company Second Ride before because they've been taking classic MZ scooters and converting those to battery power. But this conversion is for the classic Simson moped. Now, one possible reason for converting old machines like this is it takes advantage of a loophole in German law. Now, these machines were capable of reaching a top speed of around 60 kph, around 40 miles per hour, when they were first built and originally registered. And for that reason, the converted machine is also legally allowed to exceed the modern moped top speed mandated across Europe and also in the UK of 45 kilometers per hour. And that made me wonder actually whether the same would apply here in the UK and perhaps the other Super 16er classic mopeds, the sort that really did have a motor, the Mo, and pedals, you guessed it's the ped bit in the name, whether these mopeds could actually be converted to electric use, yet legally be ridden by the same age group and also travel faster than that 45 kph speed limit. Interesting question to ask. And here's another interesting question. Why are Triumph and KTM shrinking? Where's my picture gone? Oh, gold. Let me just get rid of that and see if I can find it. I've definitely got a picture of it somewhere. Nope, it's gone. Damn. All right. I know it was there somewhere. Right, so this is about Triumph and KTM. Triumph Motorcycles, who you probably know, they build their 400s in collaboration with Bajaj Auto. They have confirmed plans to introduce a new lineup of 300cc motorcycles in India next year. And the current 400cc range will be phased out. Now, the upcoming bikes will feature a downsized version of the current 398cc single-cylinder engine, which is used in models like the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400X. They'll keep the same stroke, but they will reduce the bore. Now, the reason to do this is that it allows the bikes to take advantage of the taxation structure in India, which is significantly lower for bikes which drop under that 350cc limit. My estimate suggests that riders could save around 160 to 200 pounds on the bikes in the 350 format rather than the 400 format. Now, the new range, of course, also puts Triumph head to head with Royal Enfield's 350 models, which have already benefited from that lower tax break. But the Triumphs will be more powerful. They're expected to have an output of around 35 horsepower, 32 Newton meters of torque, which is about 4 or 5 horsepower drop compared with the 400 models. But the design should deliver better low and mid-range torque, which is, of course, suited to slower riding conditions, particularly in urban areas. Now, not too surprisingly, since the Austrian manufacturer is also primarily owned by Bajaj Auto, it's been announced that KTM India will be following suit, and they will also be offering a new 350 range using a derivative of their existing 399cc LC4C engine. Power and torque figures for that bike are expected to be a little higher than Triumph, around 40 horsepower, 35 Newton meters. So again, it's a drop of about 5 horsepower on the outgoing models. And this new 350cc engine will find its way into all the 390cc bikes, including the Duke 390, the Adventure 390 series, and the upcoming SM CR and RC series. Now, Triumph say that the 400s will continue to be manufactured for export markets. Bajaj say the KTM 390s will also continue on sale outside of India. But I do wonder how long. Does it really make sense to have a 400cc bike and a 390 400? I don't know. Right, okay, so time for the in-depth item in the show. And predictably, of course, I've now lost the graphic for that completely. I do need to bring this back because I've got, just want to show you a picture from the show that the I'd prepared. So if I can get this back on screen, there we go. So, as I said, today's topic is to look at the way we assess hazards. Do the terms potential, developing, and actual hazards really mean anything? How do we approach hazards more mindfully? Now, you'll probably know that part of the bike test is the DVSA's video-based hazard perception test. The graphic I showed you a moment ago was this one, and the question, would you click for the cyclist? And the post on LinkedIn said the cyclist is moving, but it isn't a developing hazard yet, so you wouldn't score in the hazard perception test if you clicked at that particular moment. You click when something develops and could affect your driving. Well, I would click at this point. I would probably clicked even earlier, in fact. Years ago, when the newfangled hazard perception test was demonstrated to us CBT and DAS instructors, the clip that I was shown involved a kiddie on a bicycle, not riding along the road like this, but what he was doing was he was riding down a path across a playing field off to the left of the road, but he was clearly visible. He was clearly moving towards the road, and it was also equally clear that at the speed that he was moving, he would arrive on the pavement just about the time that I got there in the car that I was, the video was set on at the same time. So, you know, what will I do in the real world? Well, of course, as soon as I had spotted the rider and worked out his path and the sort of time factor involved, and realized that we'd both be arriving at much the same point on the road at much the same time, I'd be doing things like checking the mirrors. I'd be working out whether I needed to change speed, whether it would be a good idea to take up a different position on the road, and I would certainly be keeping an eye on the cyclist as a hazard. So I clicked. I scored 0. Now, in the real world, I was told, or rather in the DVSA's world, I was told that I had responded to a potential hazard. That is one that the DVSA deems not yet to be a threat, and one we don't yet need to respond to. So, I suppose in theory, as a potential hazard, he was that. He could, in theory, have, turned around and cycled back up the pavement or the path in the opposite direction. He could have turned off and cycled across the playing field. He could even have got off the bike and kicked a football around. I don't know what he might have done. But in the event, the clip showed the rider riding onto the pavement, at which point I was supposed to click, and then immediately bunny hopping off that pavement into the road in front of the car, which, in my opinion, was far too late for the driver to react. So back to this photo again, take a closer look. As I said earlier, I simply don't get the analysis of the situation here. Now, given that likely speed differential between car and cycle, chances are that the average driver or motorcycle rider would already have taken some action. Now, if that response is too early to respond to the hazard, there is something seriously wrong with the hazard perception test. Now, I would say that this scoring system is built around this idea that a developing hazard becomes an actual hazard when you must take some action. But the problem is that it's such a narrow window. Now, one of the responses on the post was actually quite perceptive. And Graham said, in my opinion, a developing hazard is not hazard perception, it is hazard avoidance. The word perception means to perceive something. So the cyclist is a potential hazard. A good driver will identify the hazard as the cyclist as such and will adjust their driving in order to deal with any possible danger, which is pretty much what I said, isn't it? Now, the trouble is, as I said, there's often a very small window between a developing hazard requiring imminent action, but action that still lies in the future, and the actual real-time inputs needed to take immediate avoiding action to deal with the threat. So, my problem with this is if learners only ever learn to identify developing hazards, they're needing very quick reactions. I've always been baffled by this insistence that the learner needs to wait for the hazard to develop. The trouble is the window between a developing hazard where this change of speed and direction is needed sort of imminently, and the actual threat where it requires an emergency response is just a second or two. Look at the photo again. How many seconds back from that cyclist do you think the car is at the moment? 1, maybe 2 seconds at the most, unless the car is already at the same speed as the cyclist. There is no way that I would be waiting to brake when I got this close to the cyclist. I would already have done it. And honestly, I'm not the only one who thinks this is an issue. There were quite a lot of negative comments on that thread on LinkedIn, and the DIA, the Driving Instructors Association, they also believe that the current hazard perception test is, quote, not fit for purpose. Right, okay, time to wrap up. And what have I got to say before I wrap up? Well, just take a look at my latest ebook if you possibly can. It's on sale in the Survival Skills coffee shop. You can download it instantly for just £7, and this is Crash Scene Overtake, and it joins Crash Scene Junction and Crash Scene Corner in the 3-book mini series. Do pop over to my coffee page. The link's actually up in the header for the show. That's it for today. Thanks to everybody who's looked in live. Thanks to everybody who will look in on catch up. You've been watching me, Kevin Williams from Survival Skills. This has been my 11s live webcast. Make a date to join me for the next show for another update, roundup of news, views, and biking tips. And if you are out there on your bike today, make sure you stay shiny side up, and then I will see you next time out.